Welcome back, Jeff Cameron Show, 93.3 Real Talk Radio, Warchant TV. This is nice. This is a treat. Joe Freeman from Tallahassee, at the Oregonian for over 20 years. He's going to enlighten us about what Florida State is expected to see when taking on Oregon State. That's tomorrow, kids. That's tomorrow. Everybody geeked up for the Super Regional. We wanted to learn more. We welcome him to the show now. Joe, how are you?
I'm doing great, Jeff, man. How you living?
I'm doing great too, man. I love college baseball, love covering college baseball, love this time of year. Oregon State, a storied program, 3 national championships. Most people know that. But I want to start there just because Mitch Kenham, head coach. Let's start with the head man.
Sure.
Obviously, you know, he played there. He was a catcher there. This is a program, as I just said, storied. And there's a lot of, I would suppose, pressure there at Oregon State because he followed a legend. Well, he followed a couple guys that followed a legend. But anyhow, it's not like they're, you know, devoid of success. And this is a program that is beloved. So what's he about? Because to listen to him talk and to see him interviewed, and that's how I've seen him from afar, he seems like a player's coach. He seems like a guy that you would love to go to war with.
You're spot on, Jeff. He is a very measured man. You see him in the dugout. He's very stoic, very unlike Pat Casey, who was the legendary coach there. Mitch played on their back-to-back national championship teams in 2006 and 2007. So he really bleeds black and orange, if you will. He loves the program. And I guess the biggest credit I can give to him is that when the Pac-12 imploded, the roster did not. The entirety of the team, at least every key player, stayed. I mean, they lost 7 guys to the draft last year. They lost, 2/3 of their starting rotation. They lost 2 outfielders. They lost 3/4 of their infield, including the number 1 overall pick in the draft, Travis Bazzana. But everybody else stayed. They had some very high draft pick or highly thought of guys who bypassed the draft to land in the program. They all stayed. The entire coaching staff stayed. They have a guy who probably will start Friday because they had to play Monday. His name's Dax Whitney. He was a possible 1st or 2nd round pick in the draft out of high school last year. He's a 6'5" freshman, throws 98 miles an hour. He landed in Corvallis instead of turning pro. So you look at the program that he's helped build to kind of, bridge what Pat Casey did. He kind of has built this, culture is the buzzword with all the college coaches and all that. Bad culture when you see it. And he has built a really big culture with a lot of emphasis on family and togetherness and all that kind of stuff. So a guy who bleeds orange and black, like I said, loves the program. And not only did he stay, but he got everybody else to stay too.
I'll ask you about, you just referred to him, Dax Whitney had the 12K masterpiece against TCU. You wrote about it and I certainly saw it. And he had 4 pitches working for him. He was dominant. We'll get into what Florida State's going to see with him in a moment. But I do want to talk to you about this culture in this team because I think, I'll just tell you this. It's funny. On my show, when we talk about big picture college sports, college athletics, college football, everybody has sort of an empathy for what happened to Oregon State and Washington State. And anybody that loves the through line and the traditions, the fabric of college sports, hates what's happened in college athletics with the destruction of the Pac-12 and traditional rivalries being thrown by the wayside in the interest of money and super conferences and all of that. And to that end, Oregon State had to travel 23,465 miles this year to play their baseball games. Talk about what I don't know what that does. Obviously, Oregon State's been very, very good, 40-plus wins. They've handled it just fine. But putting together a schedule like that, having to figure it out, everybody from Ohio State to Virginia to Indiana to all the West Coast teams. I mean, this has been – how much hell has this been for the 2 remaining teams of the Pac-12?
Well, it's been a complete blank show for sure. And, most of Oregon State's programs went to the West Coast Conference to play a kind of a 2-year bridge schedule. Mitch Kenham said that's not going to work for us. It was his message to his AD and to his program. And he decided to kind of pitch and go the bold path of going independent. And it's hard to describe how much work it took for him to put that together. He had to build an entire schedule from scratch. And basically what he did is he got out the old Excel spreadsheet. He started calling around to programs across the country, played in a bunch of high profile preseason, kind of exhibition tournaments before the regular conference season started, and then just patched it together from there. It required them, as you said, to play the majority of their games on the road. I think they played 19 in the regular season at home. Now, bear in mind, it's one of the better home stadiums in the country. They went 17-2 at home, so they lost that sizable advantage of that. But they kind of just adopted this mindset of us against the world, so to speak. And he kind of said after they lost they dropped their first game in the regional, they kind of wet the bed there. And he's like, why not? After this season, after everything we've gone through, why wouldn't we have to come up through the losers bracket at the most important time of the year? And so I think it kind of united them and brought kind of a sense of togetherness, like I was referring to with their culture. But the schedule was not easy to put together. And he tried to get as many of the old Pac-12 foes as he could and all that. And some of them kind of tossed double birds to him and said, we're just not interested, or it won't work in our schedule. But he had to kind of go through the conference dates and say, okay, who's got a bye week this week? Will they play us? They're not going to come to us, so we're going to go to them. And he kind of just patched it together like that. And, the dreaded RPI that we all have to monitor, which is one of the most ridiculous things we do in sports, it really helped their RPI because they did play so many road games. So when it did come time for the national seeds to be unveiled and all that, they were really given the benefit of the doubt because how many high profile wins they had and how many wins they had on the road. So in a lot of ways, it kind of helped them. Now, that said, it did not help them in other ways. They had numerous travel hiccups, as you can imagine, playing that many games with that many guys traveling. And I think it also really negatively affected their offense. When you're at home, you go to your hitting facility. They've got a beautiful brand new hitting facility. You go work in there for hours around the clock. You go to your pitching lab and all that stuff. You're just around. Well, when you're on the road, you get 8 to 25 swings in batting practice before the game. And so they had multiple, and I would say over half their lineup at different parts of the year went through insane slumps. There was a guy, Dallas Macias, who was a projected top 100 pick in the draft this year. He's batting 100 something. He lost his starting job midway through the season. He's been in a season-long funk. There's 3, 4, 5 guys who have done the same thing, and they kind of weathered all that. They just persevered and fought through it. And so part of, I think personally, why their offense has just exploded over the last couple of weeks is because they've just been home, sleeping in their beds, getting the work at their facility and that kind of stuff, and being around the comforts of that. So I don't know if I answered your question, but
you did. And it actually helps. I was about to ask you about it and you went there on your own, which is always helpful in an interview. I was going through the numbers and I was going through the players and I was familiarizing myself with everybody that I wanted to ask you about. And then you look at numbers, you get used to looking at baseball numbers, you know what a season is, how many ABs everybody has. And I'm going through and I'm like, there's stretches here where some of their better players just didn't show up for a month or like 3 weeks. And that really is a great way of explaining how that is. And you're right. I mean, Goss Stadium is a huge advantage for Oregon State. Everybody kind of knows this, and I'll let you, Joe, talk about this because when I watch games there, you can tell there's an electric atmosphere. What is it, close to 5,000 people?
Yeah, 4,300. Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. And they hit well there. Now, you tell me, it looks like a lively ballpark, as in I saw a lot of balls that I thought, I don't know that leaves too many places that leave there. Am I wrong on that? I know there's a ton of power from the right side with this team, and I am just kind of curious, how does it play at Goss?
It doesn't normally play like a bandbox.
Okay.
Oregon Stadium in Eugene, they moved the fences in when they hired their new coach. You look at their home run numbers, it's absurd. It's you hit a pop-up, sometimes it goes out.
Right.
That normally doesn't happen at Goss. The ball was jumping out of the park last weekend, and it definitely, as the weather warms up, and we're looking at temperatures in the high 80s, there might be a 90-degree day over the weekend. So it is going to be warm this weekend. So that could affect that. But if you look historically at Oregon State, they're not a big power hitting team. Typically, especially under Pat Casey, they were a defense and pitching team that had, a few really good offensive players, your Adley Rutschmans and your Michael Confortos and your Darwin Barneys and Mitch Canhams back in the day. And so that kind of carried them. But historically, like I said, pitching and defense. So normally it does not, just go nuts, like hitting one out the right field porch there at Doak. And so, but you're right. There was a couple blasts, and I saw it all weekend. That was like, wow, is that really getting out there?
Mm-hmm.
And I know the other thing that we all saw in that first game against USC was a little bit of a bunt-a-palooza from this team. That is a little bit uncharacteristic. They're not a team that has just bunted at will all season. Now, they'll lay down a sack bunt, and we've all watched college baseball, and for the love of God, can coaches just stop making these dudes bunt in the worst situations ever? But Mitch doesn't do that a ton. He picks his time, and they're very good at it. They're very capable, as we saw. Don't get me wrong, but I haven't seen an inning like that out of them all year. They're much more of a station-to-station team. They don't run a ton on the bases. They just have so many professional, talented hitters that they just lean on that. And so that said, they do have a couple of big boppers and multiple big boppers, kind of like the Noles. They have 4 to 5 guys who could hit the ball out of the yard, and up and down the lineup, guys can hit it out. But Iva Arquette is a shortstop they have. He's a transfer from Washington. He is a possible number 1 overall pick. He's kind of like Jamie Arnold in that he'll probably be a top 5, top 7 pick, but a potential 1-1. Gavin Turley is a kid who came in out of high school with so much hype, and he backed it up over 3 years. He became the program leader in home runs and RBIs. He broke Travis Bazzana, like I said, the number 1 overall pick in last year's draft. He broke his home run record. And then Wilson Weber is a catcher who he's their leader and their captain. He crushes the ball and has been late in the year. And then a guy that you'll want to keep your eye on beyond those is a kid named Trent Caraway. He's
5
one of
home
the
runs.
guys. Yes, exactly. Now, this is a kid who had just a couple of the worst slumps you'll ever see in the year.
Yeah.
And he's kind of that kid who's like see ball, hit ball. There's not a lot going on back there as far as approach and analytics evaluation. He's a guy who's just he's from California, he just crushes the ball and always has his whole life. And so he really went through it this year. And we were all very surprised to see it, because I think if you look at the top 100 draft picks, he was probably top 60 or 70 heading into the year. He's a draft eligible sophomore. And then the thought going, in the last month of the year was, well, this kid might need to stay another year because of the season he had. But he hit home runs in all 5 games of the regional. He hit homers in 6 of his last 7 of the year. And so just absolutely crushing the ball. And it's emblematic of a team that I want to say in May, before the last 2 regular season games, was hitting 220 in the month. That's how bad it got, kind of. Now, they were winning throughout it all, but they just caught fire in their last 2 games of the regular season. And then I'm sure everyone who's listening and watching saw what they did last weekend. They hit 372 over their last 7 games of the season. 372. I just added this up. 372, averaged 13 and a half hits a game, 11 and a half runs a game. They hit 21 homers and 18 doubles in those 7 games. So just a murderous streak.
So I started with the last 10 games all the way into the postseason. And by the time I got done doing the numbers, some of which you just told us again, and I love it, I thought, well, this is an offensive juggernaut. But I'm glad we went back to the beginning and kind of got into the totality of a season, which featured a lot of, interesting stretches. And I'm going to assume, and we'll get to Dax Whitney, because you mentioned you think he's going to start in this game on Friday, tomorrow. That's well and good, but most of us are looking at 52-6 coming out of a loser's bracket, if you will. When you outscore opponents 52-6 and just bludgeon everyone, almost as revenge for having lost the opener to St. Mary's, it's like, no, this is not happening. Here, get you some of this. I wonder, by the way, if during that run, like you mentioned, I watched most Florida State fans, I think, watched with great interest at least the final game against Southern Cal, the 9-0 shutout, and they must have thought, well, this team, as you said, Buntapalooza. Was it something they saw with Southern Cal, maybe a weakness? Because as you said, they executed that very well for a team who doesn't live by that. They executed it perfectly.
You know, it's so funny that you bring that up because so much went on in those games. It just, the offense got, I mean, that was the second game of a doubleheader that they had to win to stay alive.
Right.
And they scored 34 runs. And so it was so funny. It got lost in everything. And I never actually even asked about that because I did wonder, they had to see something. And so I would assume that, yeah, they saw a weakness. And then they lay one down and the guy, you know, wets himself and doesn't clutch up. Then the second guy does it and the third guy. And so, hey, let's just roll with this because they do have that capability. It is an incredibly fundamentally sound program. They rate 7th in the nation in fielding percentage. They have one of the highest or lowest ERAs in the country. So they can play that small ball. They just don't. They just kind of lay a timely sack bunt. So my guess, Jeff, is yes, they did see something. And, you know, you mentioned kind of sticking it to get a little what for with after melting down in that opener. It was also a little get you some to USC, which was kind of the program in the school that put the death blow onto the Pac-12.
Yes.
So, you know, that was a little bit of something there as well. But, you know, you mentioned Dax, and I imagine we'll switch to pitching here in a bit. But
go for it.
We've talked so much about their offense. And quite frankly, their pitching, I think, will be the separator in this series. Not necessarily win or lose. I mean, win or lose. Not necessarily that they will win. It's just that's where it's going to be decided. I mean, the Noles threw out 3 lefties. By the way, I should point out about now that I am a religious listener to the JCS show. So thank you for keeping me informed and all of us Noles fans from across the globe. And I know you've been talking a lot about the right-handed bats against the lefties. And normally, any baseball fan, even a casual fan, knows that would be a huge advantage. To kind of quell some of your concerns in that area, Oregon State has surprisingly struggled against lefties most of the season. And historically, and this year, the old soft tossing Jimmy lefty has kind of been their kryptonite. In the opener against St. Mary's, in fact, it was a lefty that I think he pitched 7 1/3 or 7 2/3 innings and kind of mowed through that lineup. And so, you know, on paper, you think, well, Florida State's in a lot of trouble because of the right on left matchups. Not necessarily so in this case. They have fared a lot better lately. They did against USC, with exception to the St. Mary's game I brought up. They have fared a lot better lately, including against USC. And they do tend to hit left-handed heat better. It's that off-speed lefty that, you know, we've all faced them or seen them in our lives. Your Jamie Moyers of the world. Crafty. Thank you. Exactly. Yeah. So, and, you know, that certainly is not Jamie Arnold. I don't know if it's Mendez or so. I don't know how that's going to, you know, pair, but I do think it's going to be pitched because both teams crush the ball and both teams have the capability to absolutely crush the ball. I've seen them from both sides all season. It's what arms are going to show up. Who's going to, you know, bring it on any given day? It's college baseball. I mean, how many times have we seen Mike Martin's teams just absolutely, you know, flame out at the end and you know how that goes. So I will say that Oregon State's pitching staff, very good, also very young. Dax Whitney is a freshman. Yep. Their Friday night guy was a junior paired with a sophomore. They kind of did a piggyback thing, but the sophomore pitched Monday, and I think he threw about 50 or 60 pitches. So I have a hard time seeing them go to him tomorrow. That's why I think they go to Dax between his stuff and how he's throwing and just where they're at in the rotation. So I think they go with the freshman on Friday is my gut feeling. And then the next guy is a transfer from JC, an Oregon kid, a lefty. Ethan Kleinschmidt, who's, I want to say he's 8-3 this year, just been incredible. He kind of entered the season, the pitching coach called him their little secret, air quote, because no one had ever heard of him. He's from a tiny school in Oregon, pitched at junior college last year, and then just dominated in fall camp and has pretty much dominated most of the year. And so the one separator there is they are young. I mean, a freshman and a first-year sophomore. So that could be a little something to keep your eye on.
You wrote a great story on, is it James DeCreamer? Did I get that name
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, you wrote a great story on him. I wonder if whether or not we'll see him. Obviously, it was only his second career start. He's not a guy that they would have normally turned to. They were out of pitching. This guy's come back from a ton of injuries. I would encourage all of our listeners out there to go read that story in the Oregonian. Well done by you, Joe. And I was interested in learning more about this team, so I went back and read several of your stories. And that one's interesting because he has good stuff. I watched him pitch in that game, and I thought, well, where's this guy been? Because I looked for numbers, and they weren't there. But, man, is he good.
Yeah, and I think the bigger point there is just that's reflective of how deep their pitching is. Like every college baseball program in the country, like you guys were talking about 2 months ago, there are always questions about the bullpen. But what I've been telling Oregon State fans in interviews all year is what's different about this staff is you want the guys who are going through it up and down, but have the stuff. And this staff, top to bottom, has the stuff. They have, I want to say they entered the year with, it was either 10 or 11 guys who throw in the 90s. And that includes, up to mid 90s for some of the bullpen guys. So they have the stuff. There's not a lot of staffs in the country that have as depth that they do with how hard they can throw. Now, sometimes you don't know where that stuff is going with these young guys because many of them are young. And in some cases freshmen. So, but they have gotten better as the season has progresses. And back to DeCramer, there's another guy, Wyatt Queen, who pitched the day before in an elimination game against USC. He threw 4 solid innings. So you see the talent and the depth that they have of that staff. A little less important in a best of 3, more important in a regional when you melt down in the opener, and more important in Omaha, of course. But I think this is going to come down to the guys that start the game. And as you can speak to with Florida State too, when you get into that bullpen, it's kind of flip a coin sometimes.
Everybody will be holding their breath for there. But, the last time one of our guys at Warchant talked to you, Joe, you sent us DJ.
Oh, man, I cannot apologize more for that.
Good God, man. How does a dude from Tallahassee send that death
if I could have done it differently, I would go back and change everything. What an awful season. And there's probably people right now weighing in on the chat that want us to start talking about football. We're not going to do that.
No,
but,
we will later, Joe, at some point, because I've enjoyed this. And this is fun to catch up. And it warms my heart to know that you've tuned into the show over the years.
Jeff, no, wait. I almost literally listen every day.
Good Lord.
Keep me connected to, I was born in Tallahassee, lifetime Florida State fan. I am going to be 100% impartial going into the series. I'm a 25-year pro, so it's the only time in my life probably I'm not rooting for the Noles. But I used to have season tickets to baseball games. I used to go on the field afterwards, going back to the Luis Alicea days. So,
man, you are as versed as they come when this rivalry or this matchup. It's not a rivalry. Yeah. First time they've ever played, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. And, I was secretly rooting for this matchup, but in reverse, so I could go back home and visit the family for my work's dime. I was hoping for an 8-9 switcheroo there, but So, it's going to be fun to watch. I genuinely, much like any college baseball postseason series, who the hell knows who's going to win this? I think it's about as hotly contested and evenly matched as any series there are. There's only 3 left that feature a pair of national seeds. All the others, with all the upsets and everything, are much different, as you probably know. But I don't know who's going to win. I think either team could win. Either team could sweep. We could be looking at a best of 3. It really is. I think it's going to be really fun to watch. I think we're going to see some fireworks. I think we're going to see some really high quality individual performances, and it's going to be fun. I do. The 2 things that are curious to me is I don't know how the hell they decided to schedule this on a Friday, because you got one team traveling across the country. You got the other that just played 4 games in 3 days, including one on Monday. I don't know what the NCAA was doing there, but
do we ever?
No.
Do we ever? Yeah, 2,900 miles. Have at it, boys. We'll get you going on Friday. And, oh, by the way, Oregon State, we know you had to play through Monday. Hey, we'll see you back again on Friday. Yeah, it's crazy, but it's not unusual the decisions made by the NCAA. And I know all the fine folks there in Corvallis are just as devastated as all of us here in Tallahassee about the SEC getting their head caved in this postseason. So
You
tough.
hate to see it.
You hate it. You just hate it.
You know, it's tough for the little man to have to take one on the chin like that.
Hey, Joe, this has been awesome. And I'll pick your brain on the new Pac-12 with all the states, Boise State and Colorado State and San Diego State and Fresno State and Oregon State and Washington State. All the states, baby. We'll do it. We'll have fun again over the summer.
I love it, man. I look forward to it. And anytime you guys need me, I'm happy to talk. And
thanks,
again, thanks for bringing it strong for us out here, living vicariously through you guys on the podcast world.
It's my honor and privilege. Thanks, brother. Be well, man. You take care.
All right, take care.
Yep. Joe Freeman of the Oregonian. Been there a long time, doing great work, and he was here to preview, obviously, Florida State, Oregon State. We appreciate him very much. Let's come back and react to that momentarily. Jeff Cameron, Show 93.3, Real Talk Radio, and Warchant TV.